Chapter 17. Worlds Between. The Third Hell. Sincroft, Karsten's home. Crinan stepped off the ladder and onto the rickety floor of the attic. It was dark and hot. Crinan could barely see where he was going. He knelt down and started crawling, looking for a place to rest when his hand inadvertently brushed against a bare arm. Crinan suddenly felt a pair of eyes on him.
"Don't touch me,"
he heard Malinka whisper. "Sorry," Crinan replied. He pulled his hand away and scooted backward. "It's hard to see up here."
"Go somewhere else, Crinan,"
Malinka said coldly. "Okay." Crinan turned around, but he felt like Malinka's eyes were still boring into him. He paused for a moment and thought about Karsten's words. Maybe he should try to at least make peace with her. He couldn't deny the feelings that his memories made him feel, and he didn't want to fight with her forever. Crinan bit the inside of his cheek and turned to look behind him. "So," Crinan whispered, "for what it's worth, I'm sorry for not keeping my promise. You deserve better than that." Crinan suddenly felt dirty. He wasn't the type of person to apologize. Even if he wronged somebody, he figured they had it coming at least. Everyone had something coming to them in this world. Well, everyone except for Malinka. He didn't want to wrong her. He didn't want to be the reason she felt abandoned or unloved. He waited a moment for her response, but he was met with silence. Eventually, he decided she wasn't going to talk, and he crawled away. Crinan found a flat spot and laid down. The sound of his metal armor clinking together filled the space, and he let out a deep sigh as he rested his head against the floor. Karsten had been right. As soon as Crinan was on his back, he realized just how tired he really was. As he lay there in the dark, he thought about his time in the hells thus far. He thought about the succubus, about the demonic well, and the giant nasty monster that killed him. He thought of Sage and Lucas, of Malinka and Ander, and finally of Karsten. His experiences flashed through his mind, and he tried to stay in control, tried to wrestle his own proverbial demons, but he ultimately couldn't fight the massive emptiness he felt within himself. "It's okay, son. You can feel sad." He heard his father's voice in his head. "Life isn't always easy. Sadness is meant to be felt. Go through it and emerge a better man." "Dad," Crinan whispered. He thought of his father, Commander Crinan Jameso Sr. of the Black Knight underground base in Canrom City. Thoughts of everything his father was flashed through his mind and brought to the surface everything Crinan wasn't, or the things he felt like he couldn't be. Commander Crinan was a hero. He liberated the country of Exgrain from Govian rule shortly before Crinan was born. He was strong and smart and cunning. The man, a human, always wore a smile on his face and never spoke down to his children. Crinan's father was a good person. It made Crinan wonder why he himself wasn't. "I love you, kid." Crinan's mind flashed back to a time when he was 16 years old, after he had been lost in the woods with Malinka, after his father and Captain Brand came to his rescue. He remembered his father taking hold of his shoulders and squaring him up directly in front of him so they were eye to eye. The look of pride in his dad's eyes was able to momentarily wash away the pain he felt in being separated from the girl he had grown to love. In that moment, Crinan, though young, was able to think in a very grown-up way. He realized his father loved him dearly and risked his life to come and save him. He remembered hugging his dad and crying deeply into the man's chest. The memory of his father's arms holding him tight crept over his body, and Crinan was able to feel a sense of peace. It was that moment of peace that allowed Crinan to close his eyes and drift off to sleep. "Hello." Crinan was surrounded by blackness. He saw no light, no shadows. There was no floor beneath his feet, no sky above his head. Simply blackness. Who's there? Crinan called out to the disembodied voice he had heard. His own words seemed to ripple through the nothingness, echoes being cast out into eternity. He wondered where his words would land, whose ears they would fall upon. By now, I should say that I hoped you would recognize my voice. The phantom voice returned. 'Tis I, Sage, the very one who is trying to bring you home. Sage, Crinan repeated. Where are you? I am in my home, young one, Sage replied. I sleep just as you. My Nane has reached out to you, linked with you even in the hells. Is that how you talk to me when I'm awake? Crinan asked. When you are in a state of simulated consciousness as you experience in the hells, the only way for me to interact with you is through the integrated communication system, Sage answered. But now, your Nane have brought you to a place that only you exist in. The Expanse, as we call it. Only you know this land. It is the very world you escape to when you find yourself lost in thought. You go there, even though you are not conscious of it. We now stand in the most intimate of homes you have, and here I can find you. Crinan felt a tap on his shoulder, and he spun around, coming face to face with a form composed of gray, wispy smoke. Crinan took a fearful step back, and Sage held out his hands, hoping to calm him. "'Tis I," Sage whispered. He nodded his head and took a gentle step forward. "I have come to meet you where you are most comfortable, where I do not have to fear Govian interception. Here, you are safe." Crinan didn't know what to say. He looked to his left and his right and then sighed. There was nothing but blackness in every direction, nothing but emptiness. "What do you want?" Crinan asked in a low grumble of a voice. "Why are you trying to help me?" "A logical question, young one," Sage replied. He sat down as if there was a chair behind him, crossing one leg over the other. But in life, sometimes concerning oneself with the questions of why only leads to more questions. I should say it would be in your best interest if you simply accepted that I choose to risk it all to assist you. "Whatever then." Crinan shrugged indifferently. Sage was right. The why didn't matter as long as he got out of the hells. "How are you doing, Crinan?" Sage asked with a tone of sincerity. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Crinan replied. "Fine is good," Sage nodded. "Though I should say in most instances it is a mask to hide what you truly feel. Not that it is any of my business. I just want you to know that I am here should you need to talk." "I don't need to talk," Crinan whispered. "Let's just focus on getting out." "And so we shall." Sage nodded. He paused as he idly rubbed his palms up and down his thighs. "Tell me, Crinan, are you aware of your impact on the hells thus far?" "I'm not aware of shit," Crinan spat. "Well then," Sage snorted and let out a chuckle. "Long have I waited. Long have I schemed, planned, and labored for this moment. You see, the hells is an abomination, a desecration of the once great afterscape that existed. Countless consciousnesses trapped in eternal suffering, more added every day. Who would create such a place? Why would they do such a thing?" "I don't know," Crinan answered. "For power," Sage said with a slow nod. "Lies to cover lies to cover lies so that you submit. Emperor Sidro, in all his twisted wisdom, he envisioned a place where he could punish those who defied him, a place that the living could fear, a promise of eternal pain and torment to ensure that the citizenry fall in line. All of Govia's enemies surround you in the hells. They all lament and beg for the Emperor's forgiveness, but will never find solace. You see, Crinan, fear is the quickest path to power and the easiest to maintain. The great presidents of the old corporations all burn alongside you, the resistance fighters, the countries who opposed Govian rule. The Black Knights. They all scream for freedom in the hells. It's not enough to kill someone, Crinan asked, a tone of disgust heavy on his tongue. That's enough for me. When I kill someone, they're forgiven for their crimes. Seems like justice in my eyes. Justice is a malleable term, I should say, Sage continued. Like clay in the hands of an artist, it can be whatever the sculptor wishes it. Anyway, here we stand. Well, here I sit, and here you stand. As I said, I have labored for years for this moment. The Hells is about to be turned upside down, Crinan. My program gives the prisoners their ability to fight back. They will rise against those who oppress them. They will turn the demons into prisoners like themselves. Govia will feel the pain of loss. Many thousands will die. You're killing thousands? Crinan asked. Indeed I am. Sage nodded. I am at war, Crinan. Those who are evil enough to take delight in the Hells are those who are being punished. The ones who have rotted and burned for centuries, however, are the ones who will benefit. Their freedom is at hand. The Hells will be undone, and it will be your doing. You and hundreds, maybe thousands of others will come home, and then a new fight will begin. So, I'm not the only one you're freeing? Crinan asked. The opportunity to escape will be short, Sage said. Govia will assuredly patch my portal home once it is detected. I foresee an opportunity lasting minutes if we are lucky, but it is also a part of my plan. Once the portal is closed, the Hells will remain on lockdown. I have another program waiting to be implemented that will lock everyone inside, even if Govia lifts their own lock. Players and prisoners alike. The prisoners will kill their oppressors. They will get their justice. Damn, Crinan replied. So, how do we do this? All you need to do is to keep going, Crinan, Sage urged. Get to the 7th level as quickly as you can. For now, though, I fear it is time for you to wake up. Be strong, young one. Fight like you've never fought before. And then, be free. Crinan jerked awake to find Ander kneeling next to him. He held a candle and gently shook Crinan's shoulder. At first he was shocked and instinctively reached for his sword, but then he settled and released a groan. How long were we out? He asked. In Hell's time or real-world time? Ander replied. There's a difference. There is. Hell's time, then, Crinan grunted. He pushed his body into a sitting position and gasped as his armor pinched his side. He jerked his body around until his skin was free and then looked over at Ander. 3 hours, Ander said with a smile. He reached out and gave Crinan a supportive pat on his back. How is this all so realistic? Crinan grumbled. How does my armor pinch me? How can I feel stupid pain like that if the Hells is all in a computer or whatever? A computer, Ander repeated. He fell silent as his eyes seemed to suddenly go out of focus for a moment. With trembling hands, he reached up and grabbed his head as if he were having a headache. Crinan watched curiously but didn't interfere. Ander appeared to be having a strange episode of some sort, and Crinan wondered if he should get help. As quickly as it started, however, it was over. Ander lowered his hands from his head and then reached up and wiped some sweat from his forehead. Crinan raised an eyebrow and Ander spoke. Yes, Ander mumbled. His eyes darted around hyperactively for a moment. It looked like he was confused. His tense expression quickly faded, however, and Ander locked eyes with Crinan. Yes, it is. The Hells is in a computer, my Ander's eyes twitched as he corrected himself. He shook his head as if he disagreed with his own thoughts, and then he composed himself. My friend, the answers which you seek are somehow buried within a millennium of memories in my head. A life long past, a buried conscience, one I do not recognize. His voice had lowered to a whisper. "What the fuck are you talking about?" Crinan asked. He scrunched up his face at Anders' strange behavior. "Nane was redemption," Ander whispered, looking down at his hands. "It was life anew, an opportunity for the people of Duran to start again. The Nane forms every crease and corner of the hells, the ground which you stand upon, the air you breathe. The way your armor pinches your skin, the Nane whispers it into being, and then it is so." "Well, that fucking answers nothing, but thanks for trying," Crinan said, rolling his eyes. "I am not finished, boy," Ander hissed. He snatched out and firmly took hold of Crinan's upper arm. Crinan looked down at the sudden, uncharacteristic assault, and then glared deeply at Ander. "You have 3 seconds to let go of me," Crinan warned. Ander shook his head violently and immediately released Crinan. Even with Ander's hand removed, Crinan still felt the pressure against his skin. It was surprising, an impressive strength that Crinan had not expected from the wiry, mustached vampire. "I apologize, Crinan," Ander whispered. "I do not know what came over me." Ander straightened his back, composing himself and clearing his throat. "I seem to have misplaced my thoughts. For now, let us head downstairs that we may set into motion the events of the day." Ander's eyes bored into Crinan with a pleadingly apologetic look, and he maintained his gaze for a few moments before he turned toward the ladder that led back to the main level. "What the fuck was that all about?" Crinan whispered to himself when Ander was out of earshot. That entire interaction was strange to him. Ander seemed upset about something in a way. Crinan ultimately shrugged. It wasn't his problem how Ander felt, and whatever was going on in the vampire's mind was for Ander to work out on his own. It was certainly the last thing Crinan cared to worry about. "Well, whatever then," Crinan said as he walked toward the ladder. Thoughts of the dream he'd had in the realm of blackness filled his mind as he walked the short distance. For a moment, Crinan wondered whether the dream was real. He wondered if there even was such a thing as real anymore. He chewed his lip in contemplation as he stopped before the splintery ladder. He would ask Sage next time he heard from him. Surely he would be able to provide clarification. Finally, Crinan buried his thoughts and climbed down the ladder, deciding to focus on what the day held.